Hello. Moving on to the article No Remorse, I honestly think we can all agree that this article could be considered confusing just based off of Dakota's actions compared to how he really felt. It was, to me, very confusing. I didn't quite understand why he did what he did. But looking back on it, when evaluating his actions, you can see that he easily gained access to a handgun. He had no second thoughts about what he was about to do when he was in the moment. And he shot his own grandfather that he really loved, which is weird. And you're thinking, why did he do that? Why would he lose a loved one like that? I honestly really could not tell you myself. And immediately our main focus goes to why did he do it, like I was just saying. We could make a possible list saying he's a teenager who may be suffering from anxiety, so he couldn't help himself. He may be experiencing frustration or sadness, or he even said himself that his actions may have been caused from pent-up anger that made him just release all of those emotions just all at once. But what could he have been so angry about for him to actually go ahead to such extremes to release this anger through shooting someone he really loves? It is strange for us to see and read into his actions without knowing the real reasons of why he committed such an act. When this type of conflict arises, then it makes us look towards remorse. Was he actually remorseful? In other words, is he showing signs of guilt? Does he feel the responsibility, the huge impact? Is he expressing the correct emotions in this type of situation? And is he showing signs of sadness and regret for his actions? Many things about his reactions seemed very off to me. I don't know if they did to you. Specifically from the article, right after the shot was fired, it states in the article that he was acting like a little puppy and not being able to handle what he did. And he did make the 911 phone call, so that was strange. It was really strange. And then when he was put in the patrol car, he attempted to make casual conversation by talking about his dad and like the sports he played. And then when the cop got out of the car a couple times, the camera caught him singing to songs like along with the radio. So in that type of situation, you wouldn't think someone would be doing that. You'd think maybe they'd be breaking down crying instead. My question for myself that I had was, through casual conversation and singing, was he just trying to cope and find the last bit of normal in his life amidst all this chaos? He may have felt remorseful, but at the time just might have been more focused on acting normal to cope with this like new, strange, and terrible situation that he honestly put himself in. And if you actually look into Dakota's life, you can see that it may have been a little more difficult for him, a little more hard for him to deal with in a certain way, especially when he claimed that the person he was most angry at in his life was his mother, and that's because she did abandon him, but he was just at a loss at that time, and it seems as if he suffered longer than expected because of that, and he was only left with his father, who sometimes got angry at him, would emotionally abuse him with all of the yelling. But when seeing these type of problems, it would then be understandable to see that it could have been Dakota easily shooting himself rather than his grandfather, so he could have easily committed suicide, but in this case, he did not choose that, and I believe he did not choose suicide because at this age, I think it's difficult to imagine yourself or imagine life without yourself being in it, so I think he wasn't able to grasp onto that concept. And again, he chose to shoot his grandfather instead, and then his lack of initial remorse then put on the table he may be tried as an adult for first-degree homicide, just because of the degree to which this situation occurred, so how terrible it actually was, how great of an action it was just for a minor to be committing this type of crime. As mentioned in the article, Dakota would then receive life imprisonment without parole if he was tried as an adult. Some may say, even myself, it might seem as if this was unfair that Dakota would be put on trial as an adult just because he's a minor, like I said. And it may be unfair because he might not have the capacity to understand legal reasonings, like Miranda warnings, what he's allowed to say, what he doesn't have to say. And in the time, he didn't even realize that he could have chosen to not talk to the police to explain situations, stuff like that. He didn't have to say anything when he was being pressured into it. And yes, he was being pressured into saying things, and he didn't understand that this was just normal proceedings and that he did have a choice in his situation. But then again, like I said, because of his act to how horrible it actually was, it does seem like fair in that sense that he would be tried as an adult. He did actually spend 2 hours contemplating between suicide and shooting his grandfathers. And he chose to shoot his grandfather. And, like, in that situation, too, when he was shooting his grandfather, he experienced sensations of feeling control and power in that moment, and usually a minor wouldn't go to such steps to feel those types of emotions, so that is not very average of a minor. And in reality, though, it would not have been fair at all to try Dakota as an adult. I think sometimes we need to look at minors as minors and not even question if they should be tried as an adult, but that's just my opinion. People may feel differently. It's up to you. He was experiencing mental problems that needed to be treated, and that wasn't taken into initial consideration until after he was imprisoned, and he was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and eventually he was seen to be a traumatized youth without access to his emotions in the moment, according to the article. So he was dealing with some other issues at the time. So, he wasn't able to feel the correct emotions just because of some mental problems that he was experiencing that weren't identified at the time. So I think sometimes it's important to take those things into consideration before going into that, looking into remorse, because some things just don't add up and it's not fair to evaluate. So